lighter form of the semester?
Yes.
So, double joy, right? Or not. Or maybe... it's my great pleasure to present a dear friend and a pioneer of the field of online dispute resolution, someone who's both immersed in the practice of online dispute resolution and very reflective and a thinker about these issues. So really a great combination, bringing together practice and theory. Colin was is the person who established the famous eBay ODR system, and PayPal as well. Has since had his own startup that was quite recently acquired by the largest, I think, Cortec company in the U.S. So he's doing online dispute resolution. We did e-commerce, and now in the court setting. He's also written a lot about the area, both articles and the book. I highly recommend The New Handshake. So now the virtual handshake substituting the actual handshake we used to have when we transacted face-to-face. And he's going to talk to us today about online dispute resolution and AI. So without further ado.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Orna. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Orna, everything you said about me being a pioneer, it equally applies to you. I think Orna and I figured out that we've been friends for 20 years, working alongside each other, from when online dispute resolution was just sort of a nascent movement. Maybe one day we could do this to where it is now. So I'm really excited to be talking about artificial intelligence. The other thing that I worry about is you're raising the bar too high in terms of expectations for my presentation. This is interesting for me because AI is sort of a new thing in the ODR field. So I'm delighted to make this really a conversation. I wouldn't be surprised if there's people who have more expertise about AI in the room than I do. But I do know a lot about ODR, and obviously you have one of the leading ODR scholars in the world here in the room as well. So why don't we dive in? I wanted to start with this picture of Marie Curie. I'm sure everyone knows she was the first woman to win the Nobel Prize. She was the first person actually to win 2 Nobel Prizes. I think she won one in chemistry and she won one in physics. And she was, along with her husband, she discovered the element radium. And radium was a bit of a phenomenon once it was discovered. I mean, they didn't really know what the properties were of it. But suddenly all of these products emerged saying that they integrated radium. You had everything from facial creams to butter to cigarettes. I mean, it was the hot thing. Radium was in everything. They had the Radium Dance by Gene Schwartz. And here even they had invigorating natural radioactive water from the Radium Spa. And everyone was so excited about what is this new future that radium is going to invent for us. Everyone was excited about radium because it glowed. So they actually would use it to paint numbers onto clocks. And there were people who actually painted freehand with paintbrushes, the radium onto the numbers on the clock so they would glow in the dark. And they would actually lick the paintbrushes to get a very fine point so that they could really paint the numbers so that they were clear. Well, of course, now we know radium is highly toxic. That was why Marie Curie died from radiation exposure. Many of the people who painted those numbers on these clocks actually died as well. And radium is very useful, and it's used in certain very specific applications, but it didn't live up to the promise of all of the things when it was first discovered. Everyone thought it was going to completely change the world. So why am I telling you all of this? Because I think that pretty much tracks what's happening with AI right now. Right now, we're in the middle of, we talked about this at the blockchain meeting, we're in the middle of the hype cycle on AI. AI is going to change the world, it's going to be this new super intelligence, we're going to be able to integrate it into every aspect of our lives, it's going to make everything great. Or, alternatively, it's going to be terrible, it's going to destroy the world. So I think AI is a bit of a Rorschach test right now. What you see when you look at AI reflects more about you than about the reality of what AI is. One of my favorite authors is a guy named Douglas Adams. I don't know if anyone here has ever read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But one of the quotes from Douglas Adams is, anything that's invented before you're born is totally boring and you can just ignore it. Anything that's invented between birth and age 35 is incredibly cool and is probably going to change the world and you should get a job promoting it. And anything that's invented after age 35 is against the natural order of things and must be resisted at all costs and probably will result in the end of human civilization. So again, it depends on when you're born, but that's what I mean about AI. In popular culture, when you talk about artificial intelligence, one of the first things that pops into people's minds is Skynet from the Terminator movies. I don't know if anyone remembers these movies, but someone, when did those movies come out, in the 80s? Someone around now, or maybe even a little bit earlier than now, invented this neural net-based artificial intelligence, and it became sentient, and it decided that humans were the problem, and then it created all these robots to go kill all the humans. So we have a lot of popular culture that's telling us that AI is scary. We also have WALL-E. I don't know if anybody's seen this Pixar movie. That's WALL-E over there and on the side, an old solar-powered robot who's kind of left on Earth. But humans have essentially become lazy because the AIs take care of everything, and they ride around in these floating chairs, and the AIs know what they want more than they do. So the AI says, here's your hamburger. And they go, oh, I did want a hamburger, because the AIs have figured out everything that people want. So all agency is removed from humanity. Or is the future of AI what we're talking about with self-driving cars, where it's not that we're going to put sentient intelligence into the cars, it's just that all the cars are going to be communicating with other cars, and there's going to be some centralized algorithm that's just ensuring that we don't crash. So that's a more benevolent interpretation of sort of what AI is. Now, the other thing we need to talk about is in the justice context. So there's a show called Futurama. I don't know if you have it over here in Israel, but there is judges. This is Judge 723, the robot judge that you can go in front of. It's a little Kafkaesque, you know. And it's sort of these angry judges that are going to come, and they get to make all the decisions about what's right or wrong. Or what we see in the States is there's lots of AI startups, and they have these happy robots, and they always look so innocent. But this is actually for a website called Rentervention, for people who get thrown out of their apartments and they need legal help. So they talk about, oh, our robots will help you learn your rights, and they'll write your forms for you. So again, I think when we talk about the popular interpretation of what artificial intelligence is, it goes everything from this sort of benevolent, human-assisting side to this sort of malevolent, we're giving away our agency to these algorithms that we can't really understand. But fundamentally what it is, like all technologies, it's just another tool in the toolbox. We can deploy AI for whatever purpose we decide we want to deploy it against. Actually, the programming behind artificial intelligence is not really that complicated. It hasn't really changed that much. Even referring to it as artificial intelligence is a bit of a legacy. I know one of the conferences we have in the dispute resolution field is ICALE, the International Conference on Artificial Intelligence and the Law. And in the 70s, this conference has been going on for a long time, they talk about building a digital brain. Like, how can we use computers to recreate the human brain? Well, that's actually not what artificial intelligence and machine learning is focused on now. Computers and algorithms, they solve problems in very different ways than humans solve problems. So we're not trying to create a digital judge. You know, this notion of Judge 723, it's not like we're actually going to, you know, take a Supreme Court justice and replace them with a robot. What we need to do is we need to rethink judicial processes to leverage the power. You know, we have Moore's Law, which says computer processors double in power essentially every 2 years. So that's logarithmic. That's exponential in terms of the rate that it's growing. And we have this concept of the singularity. And the singularity is the notion that at some point in the future, if you look at how fast the power of processors are growing, the power of one computer processor is going to exceed the processing power of the human brain. And then it's going to continue to grow once we get into quantum computing. So if that's coming, what does this mean? If we can deploy these tools in a way that can benefit the types of challenges that we're tackling within the justice system, within dispute resolution, what I want to talk about today is sort of, what does that look like? And what do we think that's going, what is the growth pattern? How are we going to apply these tools to different challenges within the justice system and within dispute resolution over the next 10 years? Okay? So, come on, computer. All right, why don't I see? This is inevitably the way that it goes. Okay, so I like this quote from Fei-Fei Li. It was in Wired. It says, "There's nothing artificial about AI. It's inspired by people, it's created by people, and most importantly, it impacts people." Does anyone remember Palm Pilots? You know, before we had these iPhones, we had Palm Pilots. And Palm Pilots the way it worked was, it was also handwriting recognition, but you had to learn a special alphabet. Because if you just wrote the normal alphabet, I don't know how it worked in Hebrew, but you know, like you couldn't do a T because it couldn't recognize that. So the T became sort of a backwards L. Like you had to retrain yourself to write in a certain way so the Palm Pilot could interpret. So what's happened since then is now we can give computers our very sloppy handwriting and it can make sense of it. It's not that technology has dehumanized us. It's that we have humanized technology. So now we've integrated technology so seamlessly into our lives, we can speak to our Siris and our OK Googles and our Amazon Echoes, and it understands our accents and it does whatever we want it to do. The point is, artificial intelligence is going to be humanized as well. It's not that we are going to have to change the way we live in order to interact with these algorithms. So let's keep charging ahead here. Now, I think we have a lot of expertise in the room about how AI works, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking technically about this. We'll just address it at a high level. But essentially, AI methods learn by observation. So you create a large data set, a corpus of data, and then the algorithms can go in and make observations on that data, and then write rules. And then when you give new fact patterns to those algorithms, they can use the lessons that they've learned to essentially suggest what the appropriate course of action is for that new situation. So in essence, you have sample data and expected results, a big data set that you feed into the computer, and the computer then comes up with correlations. And then essentially when you provide it a new scenario, new data, it can use those correlations, those rules, to then predict a result. So people talk a lot about what is AI, and I find there's a lot of confusion around. Sometimes people think that any algorithmic process for essentially, even if it's just a decision tree, or if-then rules that were crafted by humans, they say, well, that's artificial intelligence, or some form of artificial intelligence. And I don't think that's exactly true. I think this mechanism of having a large data set and having an AI mechanism carve out its rules, that's really what we're talking about when we talk about machine learning. And the application for this is much more narrow than sort of broad algorithmic approaches towards online dispute resolution. So fundamentally, this is about data. It's not really about, it's about the power of computer processors, and it's about data. Who's going to collect that data? Who's going to structure that data? When they talk about biases, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, biases that reside within artificial intelligence and machine learning, oftentimes those biases are gleaned from the data. The other thing is, in some of the AI work that I've done, when you put an algorithm against a big data set and ask it to pull out rules, you know, you're very curious, okay, what are these rules? What insights did it glean from this data, and how can that inform what I do? So you can actually crack it open and look at some of the rules that the AI has generated. And unfortunately, they're impossible to understand sometimes. They're so complicated, and they focus on such areas of data that humans cannot really pick out of a particular data set. So it's difficult to glean insight from some of these machine learning algorithms. But it's a black box in terms of the process, but you can evaluate the outcome. And if the outcome data is good, then you know that somehow the rules that the algorithm has come up with are generating good outcomes. So that's one of the tensions, I think, in using AI in the justice system. So much of what we do in online dispute resolution is about procedural justice. Is the process fair? Can we all agree that this process is neutral, is impartial, is accessible? But if you're using an artificial intelligence algorithm, it's coming up with its own rules and creating a black box that may be beyond human comprehension. So then instead of being able to evaluate the procedural justice, you have to evaluate it based on the outcome. So we can talk about exactly what that means and how we integrate that into the justice system. Okay, so characteristics of AI tools. I liked what Cassie Kozikrov, I can't even pronounce that, said. It's kind of like a magic lamp. You know, unlike traditional programming, where you solve a problem even if you can't think of the solution steps, that's because they let you express your wishes with examples and objectives instead of explicit instructions. But do you remember the moral of every careful what you wish for story? Again, I can't help but tell another Douglas Adams story. In Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, they create a computer called Deep Thought, this massive computer. And they ask the computer, Deep Thought, what is the answer to life, the universe, and everything? And Deep Thought says, it's going to take me 10,000 years to come up with the answer. So they wait 10,000 years, generation after generation. Finally, 10,000 years happens. They go to Deep Thought, they go up to the computer, and they say, okay, the 10,000 years are over. What is the answer to life, the universe, and everything? And Deep Thought says, 42. And And they go, what? 42? What does that even mean? And Deep Thought said, well, you should have thought about the question you were asking a little bit better, because the answer is 42, but you got to think about it. And I think that is the point of this. AI is a little bit like the magic lamp. It's not the genie that's dangerous, it's the unskilled wisher. The power that we have in AI, we have to think very seriously about how we want to apply it and how we want to train it. And a lot of the potential downstream, if you think about the Skynets, and you think about all the dystopian scenarios about AI, it comes from us, who are the unskilled wishers, maybe asking these AIs the wrong questions. So then they'll give us answers like 42 that we don't understand. Why don't I stop there and see, does anybody have any comments or questions or clarification issues? I can keep plowing ahead here. Maybe I'll keep doing that, because I want to get to the discussion as quickly as I can. I also want to start to show you actual mock-ups of tools and our development calendar that we have at Tyler.
Just one definition question. You seem to be interchangeably using artificial intelligence and machine learning. Is that intentional?
Well, yes, because I think I am using them in a synonymous way. Tell me more. What do you think the distinction are between the two?
I don't know enough. I have always understood that there's some difference, and the fact that you're using it interchangeably just made me stop and think for a minute.
Well, I think artificial intelligence to me is more, it's almost like a colloquialism, you know? I think artificial intelligence, that field of study has been around much longer than machine learning. I think machine learning, from my perspective, is a more accurate description of what I'm talking about.
Okay, because that's what I thought you were describing, that model was machine learning, which is a segment of artificial intelligence, so really you're talking about machine learning.
I am. I'm talking about machine learning. But I am interested to hear from you guys. Now, what else would be under the umbrella of artificial intelligence that would not be machine learning?
Deep learning.
What would it?
Deep learning.
Deep learning. So how does deep learning differ from machine learning?
So I'm not a computer scientist, but deep learning is different in the sense that the computer understand what it sees, although it's just binary code. In the sense that it can understand that it's a woman dancing, although it's just pixels. And so the deep understanding of the computer doesn't have anything to do with machine learning per se, which is statistical analysis.
Yeah, I mean, that is interesting, because I do want to talk about natural language processing.
Yes, so
and
NLP
it sounds like
part.
NLP is deep learning.
NLP is very, very akin to deep learning. I think the deep learning is a bit broader in the sense that NLP is just part of it.
Yeah, and I can see how machine learning approaches would also inform deep learning too. Yes. Like computer understanding gets much closer to the idea of artificial intelligence, as opposed to just blindly looking at all the data sets and culling out rules. So natural language processing. Another thing that's interesting, I have a friend who works at Google and does translation work there. And what they, you know, in the old days of Alta Vista, I don't know how many people remember Alta Vista, you would give it a sentence and then it would just go look up all the words in the dictionary and then try and change the endings. So if you were to take an English sentence and translate it to Hebrew and then back to English, it would just be totally good, because it didn't really understand what it was doing. It was sort of a fairly simple approach. Well, now what they're doing at Google is they're actually trying to, I think, maybe deep learn the meaning behind some of these things. So what actually they've done, and I think they use machine learning to inform this process, but the computer, the algorithm they use for translation now at Google, it has created a new language. So it doesn't translate from English to Hebrew or from English to Japanese. It translates from English into this new language that it has crafted. And then it translates from that language into Hebrew or into Japanese. Now, so you think, okay, well, that's really interesting. Like, what does it know? So let's go look at this language that it's created. And if you try and do that, my friend explains to me, who has a PhD in linguistics, you can't make heads or tails of it. It is gobbledygook. It is all, you know, A1, F0, you know, 2B. Like, we cannot understand what the computer. But if you look at the output of that deep learning mechanism for translation and compare it to other approaches we have for translation, it's vastly superior. So we can evaluate the output and say, wow, this is really good, and it's getting better all the time. So this is valuable to me, to make the distinction between machine learning and deep learning, and both of those are under AI.
I'm sorry but deep learning is a subset of machine learning, actually.
It's a subset.
Yeah, so actually machine learning is a subset of AI, and deep learning is a subset of...
I disagree. There are different branches.
I just asked my husband, who's a computer scientist.
This is great. And I am the first to admit I don't know any about any of this stuff. So the level of my sophistication in terms of comprehending the distinctions between these areas is low. Fortunately, I'm about to apply it to ODR, which I know a lot about. But so I think maybe I'm focusing on machine learning in particular.
Yeah.
And then if there are other areas of artificial intelligence outside of machine learning and deep learning, I'm interested in that too, because the question is how is that applicable to the tasks that we're wrestling with. But again, people often say to me, Colin, are you going to build a digital judge? Are you going to write software that will one day create, you'll be able to take John Roberts out of the Supreme Court and swap in a bot? And from my perspective, that's not my objective at all. The field of online dispute resolution is about using technology to help parties find fast and fair resolutions to their disputes. And there's some things that technology can do very well. Replacing John Roberts, that's a pretty tough challenge. Replacing a human judge who is thinking about these things in full sophistication. But there are lots of ways that technology can leverage some of these tools in the interim that can help with that objective, which is helping people find fast and fair resolutions to their disputes. So that's where I'm going to focus my energy. Okay? All right, so this is great. I can already tell the discussion is going to be very rich. So please keep emailing your husband so that you can clarity. Okay, let me see here. Is my thing working? No, it is not. All right, so let me go back here. Okay, so I did talk about this. So one of the things, one of the case studies actually that I heard presented is the use of AI for addressing diabetic blindness in India. I don't know if anybody else has heard about this as well. The challenge in India, there are more than 70 million people that have diabetes and that they're at risk of developing diabetic blindness. And one of the things you have to do is you have to do a retinal scan to essentially interpret whether or not someone is at risk of developing this blindness. But the challenge is they only have 11 eye doctors for every 1 million people. Now, there's a lot of smart techies in India, and one of the things that they started to do is automate eye screening. So they deploy lots of these machines to get pictures of people's retinas, and then they send all the scans into an AI. And they've trained this AI to look at all of these scans to pick out which people are at risk, because that helps them focus their resources. So that sounds pretty cool, right? Like, why can't we use that in the justice system? Now, one of the things that's interesting is that they found the AI, when they were going through and interpreting all of these scans, one of the things that the machine does when it scans your retina is it actually puts information about where the scan is happening, which hospital it's happening in. It's in the image that was sent to the AI. And when they went in and they looked at the lessons that the algorithm had taught itself, it was actually looking at that information and factoring it into whether or not the scan the person had, because it found that that was relevant information. There was correlation to outcome. So they said, oh, wait a minute, we don't want that. We don't want the algorithm to be utilizing the location where the scan took place to influence its decision. So they had to go in and then essentially reshape the algorithm to exclude that information so it's focusing only on the data in the image. So that's what I mean about this machine learning can sometimes go in directions that we don't predict. And factor in information, make correlations that we kind of might not want it to make. And that's one of the ethical dilemmas I want to talk about as well. So there's a lot happening in the medical side. Unfortunately, we can't decide legal cases just by looking at a scan and looking for certain patterns in the retinal scans. But if we were to apply it to justice and to ODR, what would that look like? Now this is interesting because I talk about this study all the time, but this was an Israeli study. Does anybody here know Shai Danziger at Ben Gurion University?
It's a big country, you know.
It's a big country.
The parole boards, yeah. It's
I joke with Orna that, from the States, every time I meet an Israeli, well, all Israelis know all the other Israelis. Oh, do you know Orna? Unfortunately, it's not the way that it works. But this study was very interesting because what he looked at was parole hearings. I think it was over 10 months. He looked at judges that were evaluating parole. So these are prisoners that are coming in saying, oh, you should reduce my sentence or you should let me out. And what they found in this study was that at the start of the day, the judges were much more lenient. But over time, they became harsher and harsher until lunch. And then they got lunch, and then they became more lenient again. And then they got harsher and harsher, and then they had a tea break, and then they became less harsh, and then they got harsher and harsher again. So what would be an explanation for that? One of the explanations is blood sugar. Like we all have little kids, they get cranky when you get hungry. Another explanation is decision fatigue. If you ask someone to make the same decision over and over again, they start to get tired, or they start to become skeptical when they hear the same argument. So for the prisoner, when they come in and say, hey, I'm reformed, you should let me out, they don't know where they are in the process. That's their one interaction with the judge, but the judge is hearing that again and again and again over the course of the day. So the point that I'm making is, we idealize the justice system as being fair. We have these statues at our courts of the blindfolded woman with the scales. But it is very easy for us to look at the courts and see examples where human bias, where human frailty factors into the decisions that we make. Yes? What was the point?
Well, I'm sorry to say that, but I think there's a different answer for this, for those results. What happens during the hearing during the day is that usually lawyers are asking to be first in the morning, or they're asking to be scheduled after the break. So what you get is, what he was really getting the result is that you get those who get a good lawyers in different times of the day. So it's completely not that. Okay?
So, well, I can see that, especially if a lawyer had seen this study and they got an announcement that your case is coming up at 11:30, I would immediately file a continuance to say, well, let's reshuffle the deck because I want to try and get as close as I can to 9 a.m. So I think there's a lot of factors that come into this. I don't think this was a scientific study in terms of a perfect control group. But in my experience, again, the dispute resolution side, we do a lot of insurance arbitrations, and people make these decisions one after another. And you get hungry, you get tired, and it can affect, even on a subconscious level, the justice that you are delivering. Yeah.
But I think this is also an interesting and important point about machine learning in general, that it is based on statistics and correlation, as you nicely explained. And since we don't know whether correlation could be explained by causation, right? That maybe it's the more manipulative and pushy and best lawyers are actually litigating in the morning. They guess the best slots in the morning or after lunch, regardless of the blood sugar level of the judges. Maybe just better lawyers that are litigating during that time because it fits their schedule, and therefore we get these results. And I think that in machine learning, we see, one of the problems is that we base the outcome is based on correlation rather than causation, and sometimes create these biases and distortions that we don't plan.
Well, I could see if it is true that the best lawyers schedule their cases in the morning, and then you get a big data set of all of these cases and you train an algorithm, the algorithm may presume that cases that are scheduled in the morning are more likely to have one outcome versus another, because again, you're training off of the data set, and the data set may have aspects
partial
of it,
data.
right, that the algorithm can pull out. I will say one big machine learning, I need to be careful with my terminology now, machine learning project that we did in the ODR context dealt with reviews. So it would be like TripAdvisor or Yelp, giant databases where people come in and they leave reviews for coffee shops or restaurants or different things. And the challenge is, some of those reviews are fake negative reviews. Meaning, like, I have a coffee shop and down the street there's another coffee shop and I hate that coffee shop. So I'm going to go on Mechanical Turk or go on Upwork and hire someone in Pakistan to come and write a terrible review of that coffee shop. And then when you read that review, they've clearly never been there before. I mean, they don't describe anything. It's very high level. They don't actually talk about the decor or the food. They just say the people are mean. It's very generic. But the problem with fake negative reviews, actually a help with a fake negative review, is there's an aggrieved party. Is the person that receives that fake negative review, they're upset. And they say, you should remove this review because it's clearly fake and it was put up by my competitor. The more pernicious problem in these review databases are fake positive reviews, where, welcome, no problem, where someone actually pays someone in Pakistan to come and review their coffee shop and then write a positive review. Now the problem is there's no aggrieved party there, right? The person that receives the fake positive review is happy because it increases their score. The person that wrote the fake review is happy because they've probably been compensated to do that. The victim in that is the user, because they come into the platform presuming that the reviews are true. So we actually wrote, essentially, a machine learning algorithm to go and read all these reviews and see, could we teach a machine learning algorithm to pick out the fake reviews? And we had a database of more than 150,000 reviews that had been reviewed by manual customer service representatives and marked this is fake or this is true. So we gave that to a machine learning algorithm and trained it up. And then when a new review came in, essentially the algorithm would look at that review and the language in the review and then say, we think there's a 90% likelihood that this is fake, or we think there's a 10% likelihood that this is fake. Now, one of the things that we learned is the machine learning algorithm cannot get higher accuracy than the accuracy of humans that created the data set in the first place. Because the customer service reps were only about 90% accurate. They would sometimes misidentify feedbacks themselves. So if you use a data set that's only 90% accurate, the machine learning algorithm that cannot exceed that accuracy. But one of the other things that you'll remember, in the early days of OCR, optical character recognition, there were all of these different mechanisms for scanning text, scanning written text, and then converting it into, like a Word document, from an image to a Word document. And what they found is none of these algorithms could exceed like 95% accuracy. And actually 95% accuracy in optical character recognition is not very good. If you scan an image and you only get 95% accuracy, it's almost not worth your time because you have to go back and fix the 5% of errors. But there were 3 separate companies that came up with optical character recognition algorithms, all of which could only get 95% accuracy. But what they found is when you combine all 3 of those algorithms, they could get to 99% accuracy. So it may be that what we need to do is not only have one data set that we train a machine learning algorithm on, we need to have multiple data sets with different algorithms that are all trying, and then maybe we can exceed the accuracy of the initial data set that it's trained on because they all are flawed in different ways in terms of the rules that they teach themselves. Okay? So maybe we can come back to that too. All right, let's talk about online dispute resolution. So this is what, your timing could not be better. So online dispute resolution, as I said, is the use of information and communications technologies to help people resolve their disputes in a fast and fair way. Now, we actually are starting to get a little bit more fine-grained about what ODR is, because there are different kinds of ODR. A lot of what I focus on is writing technology that mediates human-to-human communication. So maybe we build an online forum, an online chat room that is optimized around helping parties work together and reach a settlement agreement. Some other approaches are algorithmic. They're not machine learning, but they're algorithmic. And you can imagine, like a blind bidding is a very common, simple game theory approach to resolving disputes. If Orna and I have a dispute, and she thinks I should pay her $1,000, and I think I should pay her $100, we can go into an algorithm that lets us put in 3 secret bids, bid A, bid B, and bid C. And we can say our resolution percentage is 10%. And so we each put in our bids, and then the algorithm will compare bid A between the 2 of us. Is the bid within 10%? No, throw that bid out. Bid B, are the 2 bids within 10%? No, throw them out. Bid C, are the 2 bids within 10%? Yes, the case settles for the median. Okay? And if bid C does not match, the beauty of that is Orna never knows what my bids were. So it lets us, in a person-to-person direct negotiation, if you put an offer on the table, you're actually revealing a lot of information to the other side. And sometimes we talk in negotiation theory about the winner's curse. I'm sure we've all had this experience, where you go into your boss and you say to yourself, I'm not going to take $100,000. I'm going to get $100,000, not a penny less. And you go into your boss and you say, $100,000. And the boss goes, $100,000? Oh, great. Okay. Sounds good. 100K. You got it. Sign on the dotted line. And you go, no, I should have asked for $150,000 because you won too easily. The thing is, human-to-human direct negotiation, there's a lot of game that goes into that. And you have to be very careful about what information you share. You can use online dispute resolution technology to essentially streamline that negotiation process and change some of the incentives. So you have facilitated, mediated, computer-based communication, you have game theory, but now you also have some of these artificial intelligence machine learning algorithms. And these are all very different types of online dispute resolution technology. So in the ODR field, we don't talk about AI and machine learning, we talk about the 4th party. So you can imagine in a dispute, you have 2 disputants. That's party 1 and party 2. Those are the disputants. And then you have a 3rd party. And the 3rd party is the mediator, the arbitrator, the judge. The human who is not a party, they don't have a stake in the outcome, but they have a role in helping the parties find a mutually acceptable outcome, or evaluating their cases and rendering a decision. We call technology the fourth party. And there's a lot of things that we can ask the fourth party to do today. And we say to the fourth party, hey, would you send us calendar reminders when we have a meeting coming up? Will you save all of our messages? Will you store our documents and then let us search them full text? Those are all things we ask the fourth party to do every day. But the thing is, the fourth party is getting smarter all the time. And when we first started the online dispute resolution field, we didn't think that much about the fourth party. We were just trying to replicate face-to-face dispute resolution online. But now what we found is the fourth party is actually transformative in terms of working with the parties, party one and party two, in order to reach agreement. It's also transformative in providing new capabilities to third parties that they didn't have before. There are some things that the fourth party can do that a third party should not do, ethically or procedurally. And there are some things that a third party, a human neutral, can do that technology shouldn't do. So we think about the third party and the fourth party as partners. How do we create technology that can work seamlessly with the human party to that dispute? To, again, optimized around trying to reach an agreement, help the party reach an agreement. So a lot of what is in the fourth party now is what we're talking about, if-then rules or decision trees. Human written rules that can evaluate cases and then put them down different branches. So we can look at those decision trees and say, do we think this is fair? And we can tweak those because that's powered by humans. Machine learning, obviously, as I said, is a black box. So much of what we do in the ODR field is procedural justice. It's a little confusing for us to think about, well, how do we use a mechanism where we don't really understand what the process is internally? And again, people say, are you going to use technology to create digital mediators and arbitrators? Because that's what the third party does. And we say, no, it's actually not what we're doing. One of the things we have in arbitration is called day and night baseball. Have you guys ever heard of that? I don't even know if you heard about it. Yeah. Baseball arbitration. So again, an arbitrator is like a judge. An arbitrator listens to the two sides and they render a decision. In day and night baseball arbitration, the parties put their best offer on the table. Now in day baseball, you see the other side's offer and you can adjust your offer. Say, oh wow, okay, that's their offer. All right, I'm going to ask for more or I'm going to ask for less based on what they say. In night baseball, you don't see the other side's offer. So it's like the blind bidding process that I talked about. That's the blind part. So imagine you have two people and they say it's a slip and fall and it's a store owner that's going to need to pay something and it's the injured party that's trying to get something. And in night baseball, the two parties, or maybe the lawyers for those parties, they put their best offer on the table. And the arbitrator's only job is to decide which offer is fairer. The arbitrator cannot write a new decision. The arbitrator can only evaluate the offers put in front of them and pick. So when people say to me, are you going to go build a digital John Roberts? Are you going to go build a judge? I say, no, we need to rethink the way the justice system works to leverage how technology operates. And instead of having a digital judge write a whole decision and go read all of the case law and say, okay, the appropriate outcome in this case is this amount and here's the rationale. Maybe the better thing to ask the algorithm to do is to say, go look at 1 million cases that look like this one, come up with what you think is fair, and then evaluate these two offers and then pick the one that's closest to what you think is fair. You think about IBM Watson. Do you guys know about Jeopardy over here? Jeopardy. You know that Watson won Jeopardy a few years ago? The way that Ken Jennings, who is the greatest man who's ever played Jeopardy, plays the game is when Alex Trebek is reading the question, it pops into Ken Jennings' head. He has the neurons firing and he buzzes in and he says, this is the answer. That's not the way Watson plays. The way Watson plays is as Alex Trebek is saying each word, Watson is creating lists of thousands of possible answers and scoring them for probability of being the best answer. And every time a new word comes out, it reshuffles all of the answers. And when one of the answers crosses the threshold of being a likely probability of being the right answer, then Watson buzzes in. So Watson does not operate the way Ken Jennings' brain operates, but Watson beats Ken Jennings. Just like Deep Blue won chess games. The way that Garry Kasparov plays chess, he doesn't think 5, 6, 7, 8, and then calculate every possibility of all the moves and score them all, and then say this is the best move. He has an instinctive sense in what's the best move. But that's the way Deep Blue works. by going deeper into the game and generating all of these possibilities and scoring them all and then picking the one it thinks is best. So what I'm saying is, this is not about us trying to replicate the existing system with these new technological tools. We may need to change the way we think about the justice system and what justice is based on the way these algorithms can deliver value to us. Okay? So I'm putting that out as a testable proposition that I want all of us to discuss. So that's what I mean when I say we're not trying to build digital mediators and arbitrators. We're trying to build processes that can achieve the objective of resolving cases at scale, but leverage technology the way that it operates. Another thing that's a huge tension is dispute resolution. The dispute resolution field is very focused on confidentiality. We have essentially absolute confidentiality with our parties. And we say at the beginning of a mediation, any notes, anything we hear from you, we will not share with anyone else. And even we train our mediators at the end of a session to rip the notes up that they've taken in front of the parties and throw them away to emphasize that commitment to confidentiality. But as I said before, machine learning is all about data. We have to collect this data and we have to structure this data. We have a lot of data in the courts. We have so many decisions, but that data is not really structured. So it's very difficult to give it to an algorithm and have it make sense of it and then essentially extract meaningful rules it can use for future cases. But if we are going to be capturing this data, how do we anonymize it? How do we protect the confidentiality of our parties while at the same time enabling that data to be available to our algorithms so that they can continue to refine? One of the big criticisms of dispute resolution, there's a famous article by a Yale professor named Owen Fiss, and it's called Against Settlement. And in this article he says, we should not settle any cases. All cases should go to a judge. Because the only way that the law gets smarter is if a case goes to a judge and the judge can decide it and then factor that information into its precedent. Now in the United States, 98% of cases filed in civil courts never make it to a judge. We're settling the vast majority of these cases, which means the law is not really evolving in response to all of those settled cases. And we in the dispute resolution field, again, we're focused on resolving disputes between parties without going to court. That's what we're an alternative to the court. So it may be, again, the courts are only looking at this they're only looking at the toenail of the elephant and trying to make conclusions about what is just based on that tiny volume of cases in terms of the overall volume of cases that are actually being resolved. So, okay, let me keep charging ahead. Any other thoughts, questions, reactions, please?
Yeah, I have a question. You said that the fourth party could work by analyzing thousands and thousands of light cases and figuring out, so how does it know what's a light case? I mean, part of the judge, part of the job is to figure it out in law school, right? Some cases look similar, but they're distinguishable in some way, and it's very difficult to determine what's a light case and what's the parameters.
So there's an easy answer to that, but it actually is not that satisfying, because the more complex answer to that is, I think, more in line with the sophistication of what you're saying. I mean, I work with courts. That's what I do. I travel around. We have more than 50 courts in the United States that have deployed online dispute resolution, mostly for low-dollar value civil cases. And when you go into the court, they have a taxonomy of cases. Like, if your case is worth less than $6,000 and it's a civil case, you're in small claims. If it has to do with a parking ticket or it has to do with a speeding violation, you go to traffic court. They have a landlord-tenant court. They have a family court. So they've created broad categories. So again, if I'm trying to build a machine learning algorithm to decide a landlord-tenant case, probably what I'll do is I'll go get lots of landlord-tenant cases. Now, that's the shallow answer. Small claims is actually a meaningless designation to a party, because I've done small claims cases. I've mediated hundreds of these cases, and they don't look alike. Some of them are intellectual property cases, some of them are barking dog cases. So if you try and say, okay, well, we're going to give all these small claims cases to an algorithm, and then that algorithm is going to extract rules and then be able to interpret. Well, if they're all different types of cases, and the only commonality is that the value of the case is less than $6,000, that is a bad classifier. So I guess what I'm saying is, we need to structure the data that we're gathering on these cases so that it's meaningful to an algorithm, so that it can say, okay, these are landlord-tenant cases. Landlord-tenant cases look like this, and here's a new case that's coming in, and this is a landlord-tenant case, so the algorithm can make connections between the lessons it's learned and the data in that particular case. So I think we have a lot of work. The real challenge with AI is not getting a machine learning algorithm and feeding it data. It's getting the data and structuring the data so that it's interpretable by an algorithm, so that it can glean useful rules. And that's what, we have so many AI startups in the law in the States, and they're taking all these cases, You know, they've been decided by judges, and they're trying to interpret them. I think, again, deep learning, so they understand fundamentally what it's about, and then structure that data so that they can use it, and it's garbage in, garbage out, because it's not structured adequately. So, I see some nodding heads. Maybe that's something we.
Is this being applied already in some categories of cases, or this is sort of aspirational?
Aspirational, and I do have a slide about that too. People are talking about AI as if like, oh, around the corner we're going to have algorithms and all the lawyers are going to lose their jobs. There are discrete applications of AI that are happening right now, and I'm going to talk about that, like natural language processing. Very powerful, very useful, where people can come in and free text say, I'm being thrown out of my apartment and I don't know what to do, and you know, I'm not getting my security deposit back. Well, an AI can go in and break up that sentence and sort of figure out, okay, what is this person saying? And then you can try and put them into an appropriate resolution path. That's something that's doable with AI today. But what I'm talking about here, where you actually try and decide cases, like decide a landlord-tenant case, I don't think we're there yet. The one application in the courts that I think is getting, that people talk about a lot, is in sentencing guidelines. And there's actually a case in front of the Supreme Court right now, which I think is a Wisconsin company, that once a judge has decided a criminal case, there's a company, you can go and you can put information about the offense into this algorithm, and it will recommend what the sentence should be. So that's an area where AI is being deployed within the courts. But the reason why it's in front of the Supreme Court is people say, well, you know, is that fair or is it not fair? And this company is basing this on large data sets. They won't share the data set. So all you can do is evaluate the outcome. And one of the things we know in dispute resolution is, you know, there's no objective truth. I can say, based on this offense, this person should be in jail for 10 years. And victims' rights people would say, that's way too short. And public defenders would say, that's way too long. And who knows? You know, there's no objective standard as to what's appropriate or not appropriate. So we should return to that. Yeah.
I think you're completely right, but I would say that one thing that you can glean is, I mean, if you have the data and you can actually structure it, then what you get is you get path dependency in the sense that it might, you know, some people might say 10 years is too low, and some people might say this is too much. But at least what you get is similar cases that might, you know,